want to know which planet was causing your suffering? How about Earth?
Hey everyone, Brandplex here, back with another Eternal Return video. For today's video, we're going to be talking about Leni, the newest character as of patch 1.8, otherwise known as the Season 2 release. So Leni is going to be a mage pistol user, so she'll be building a lot of skill amp, but she's also a support, so she can really utilize some other items such as Nightingale pretty well. But before we get too deep into her build, let's talk about her skills really quickly in case you don't really know what she does. Her passive is her best part of the kit by far. It's basically this buff you get to allies that you hit with your skills, and it gives them this teddy bear that gets thrown at people when they damage them. So this teddy bear will count as your skill, and it will reduce all of your cooldowns by about 1.5 seconds when maxed. The damage is really laughable, so I don't want to talk about that, but the cooldown reduction is invaluable because it affects your basic abilities all across the board. So you hit one ally, they auto someone, you get 1.5 seconds for free off of every ability, and it really accelerates your ability cycling very quickly. Leni's Q is going to be a line skill shot that explodes at the end of it, or if you hit a teammate or an enemy. This explosion will deal some pretty mediocre damage, but will give a lot of healing, so you really want to focus on using this on allies as much as possible, because not only does it heal them for a ton, it's also going to give you the benefit of your passive. And once again, with your Qs coming off pretty fast on cooldown, you're going to give a lot of healing and potentially damage over time if your enemies are on top of your allies, which will happen very often if they're being dove. Your W is going to be kind of a hammer jump. Basically, Leni jumps at a target location and swings her hammer down. This hammer swing, whoever it hits, will be slowed very briefly, and then if they're enemies, they'll be slowed for longer, but if they're allies, they'll speed up after being slowed for a very brief moment. This ability will also give your allies the passive after they're slowed, so obviously it'll help you cycle again, but the main usage of this ability is going to be jumping away from enemies. I think Leni's damage is really bad, so you're never really jumping into enemies to deal damage. You're only doing that if you're finishing someone off, and odds are you probably won't finish them off unless you have the final shot on either your Stampede or Devil's Marksman if you're going those items. Your E is going to be a conal AoE. Leni just shoots a gun in one direction. If it's an enemy, they take some damage and are stunned for like half a second, and if it's an ally, they get a pretty massive shield. It's important to note that all of Leni's abilities that affect allies have a very good amp ratio for supportive abilities. So for example, Leni's Q has a 40% amp ratio on healing, and I think her E is also about a 40% amp ratio on the shield. So basically, because of how short her cooldowns are on her basic abilities, you can really rotate these amp ratios very often, and this means that you really do want to have mage items on Leni just stacked up because you will get so much value out of them. Her ultimate, last but not least, is going to be a launch pad that you drop. You're going to target direction, drop it on the floor, and then after like a second, it'll pop and then launch either Leni or any enemies hit in that target direction. Allies won't be affected by this, so you don't get your passive on it, but it's a pretty good escape tool or kind of a get off me tool, and it's also a very good catch tool. So this is probably another very overloaded part of her kit. When you're level 16, the cooldown on this is 10 seconds, which means that late game, you'll have this up every 7 seconds at bare minimum if you haven't ran a blood CDR item, which I think you'd rush every time. So this makes Leni's catch very good late game, and it's a pretty situational catch in the early to mid game just because it is 30 seconds to 20 seconds at level 6 and 11, which is not too bad, but a lot longer than obviously 10 seconds. So going into her build, this is my current route. It's kind of like an alt route because it's less contested by other Lenis, so it's usually pretty consistent. Obviously, beach is very dangerous, so you're gonna get in, get out, and then TP to a teammate, and you're gonna play about as normally as you can. I think the main difference for my build is going to be the upgrades I go for. I essentially only aim for Taproots because Taproots not only gives me the CDR cap upgrade, but also gives me a very healthy amount of HP and also the movement speed boost that you get from having a upgraded leg item. Obviously, Queen of Hearts does give you a better mix of stats because it gives you the amp upgrade and as well as the cooldown cap increase, but because I think Leni is very useful as a kiting character, I think the movement speed increase from Bloodroot or from Taproots is a lot more useful than the better stats from Queen of Hearts, which is my impression from the first thoughts, so you can really build her however you want. I'm just pretty sure that you never swap off of Nightingale because it's an insane upgrade, unless you're getting something like Scotty. I guess you could swap off Nightingale late game, but 12% of a late game Leni with 3 upgraded items is a lot. I don't think you're getting an amp ratio high enough to actually cover that, but maybe you do. So for weapon, I'm always going for Devil's Marksman because Leni doesn't really auto attack that much. So having that third shot just to give you a little bit more oomph in case you do auto that often is really helpful, just because Leni's kit is lacking a lot of damage. For the chest piece, I'm going for the Holy Orders. I do think there's an argument to be made where you could go Mithril Gown and then Persona to really maximize your amp, but since Leni is a support character, and since you're going for a Blood as your very first item, the way I see it is that you're going to be playing very low on item economy, and so if you do get the luxury of it, go Mithril Gown, go Persona, but I think odds are you're probably going to be going Holy Orders, and then keeping your CDR hat, which will kind of suck a little bit. Obviously, if you can get the Imperial Virginet upgrade, you can go for that, but that's also a luxury as well, because if they find a Virginet off a corpse and then upgrade it and all that. So basically these are the items I'm going, just because they're relatively cheap. Obviously a Blood is not very cheap, but if your team is playing well and you're around them for a lot of farm and you have a few good fights, you will be able to afford the taproots right at day 3, which is again very greedy, but you are playing a healing support, so the odds that your teammates go down, if they go down, are very low if you're playing properly anyways. And by the time day 4 comes around, you will have the res just in case something does go that poorly wrong. For augments, healing factor is pretty much the only augment you're allowed to take on Leni. Red Sprite does interact with their passive in a very interesting way. The only issue is that since you're once again playing supportive and your level is relatively slow because you're not farming animals as fast, Red Sprite doesn't scale as fast as it should if you're playing a proper character for it like Ava. So that's why I don't think you should go anything but healing factor, because nothing else really works on Leni. The Imperial Bloodline would also technically work, but you already have such insane healing from your Q that you don't really need the Omni Vamp at all. So healing factor is just going to give you a lot more power. It scales multiplicatively with Nightingale, so it's a very good early game augment, as well as scales very late as you go on later into the game. Also, the bonus AP you give to your teammates will always be very welcome, just giving them a bit more oomph no matter what part of the game you're at. For sub-augments on the green tree, I personally recommend always Thorn Shackles and Logistics, just because, is it called Logistics? It probably is. Just because Thorn Shackles will be very helpful when you're crowd controlling an enemy that's diving you to help you yourself, and your DPS peel that person off and kill them. And then Logistics is just an insane credit hack. You will be going for taproots, so you will want to kind of have those cameras on hand for any objectives, and Penny Pincher doesn't really have as much value, because if you're going Penny Pincher, odds are you're going to be converting that Penny Pincher value into cameras late game, so why wouldn't you just get the cameras faster, if that makes sense. Each night you'll be getting the equivalent of 120 credits, which is way better than most of the value you're getting from Penny Pincher in a regular game anyways. So if you're going Penny Pincher, I think you should really swap to Logistics, because you're getting the value way sooner, and it'll feel a lot better as you play throughout the game, instead of just potentially getting 15 credits faster of an item here and there. Obviously, if you have an optimal strategy on Leni and you're playing a 3-stack and you need Penny Pincher for that strategy, go ahead and do that, but I'm pretty sure Logistics is just way better. For the other side of the sub-augments, I think Retreat is the best. Ender Reaper is very good just to help your heals do a little bit more, and then I think you go Stopping Power just to do a little more damage. Leni's damage isn't very good. Honestly, you can make an argument for going Open Wounds, just because, again, your base damage is pretty bad, and I don't think you'd be totally wrong for that, but I think Stopping Power is just generically a lot safer, and Open Wounds has historically been very bad since its release in preseason, and I have a feeling that it still would be terrible even now. Maybe one more buff, make it good again. So attack skills, I recommend going Healing Wind, because you're going Healing Factor. It's a very good scaling rune with that, and as well as having Nightingale will make Healing Wind very, very powerful. I do think it's a bit redundant because of how powerful your Q is, but if you whip the Q and you need that burst healing, Healing Wind will be there to save you. You could take Electrical Shift or Blink for additional mobility, or even the Soul Stealer augment or Soul Stealer's attack skill. All these are pretty good options for movement speed, but I think Electric Shift is my personal favorite of those three, just because it has a short cooldown, not as short as Soul Stealer, but it's a lot more versatile for personal use. And if you're playing Leni, in my opinion, you should always be either second to die or last to die, just because you should be playing safe. So going into the playstyle of Leni, I think you're playing her as a kitten style. If you don't know what kitten style means, it essentially means you're choosing a teammate to attach to permanently. You're going to make sure they live, make sure they deal as much damage as they can, make sure that if it comes down to it, your life over theirs, or rather their life over yours, and you're going to make sure that they have as many resources to succeed as possible in gameplay, just because you are saving your own credits for yourself. And Leni is really powerful with this because, again, all of your skills do better when they're buffing allies because of your passive. If you Q like an enemy tank, your Q is gonna be on a very long cooldown. You're essentially voiding 1.5 seconds cheated out of all of your abilities because you chose to do a very small amount of damage. Whereas if you had used Q on an ally, not only might you have healed them, but you're also going to get that Q way faster as opposed to before. It's like basically having your Q CD late game if you have tap roots, or 40% CDR, however you got it, if you Q an ally and then they auto, as opposed to queuing an enemy and not tagging any allies. So it's really important to play safe. I personally recommend using E just as a permanent shield on all allies, and if you see an enemy next to an ally, just consider that extra value. Your damage is really low as Leni. You might see your damage numbers being pretty high at the end of the game, but odds are if you're playing the support kitten style, all that damage is kind of splash damage off of someone diving your carry, which ironically is a lot better than poke damage you would have done, because when you're defending a carry, you're helping them kill that person before they get killed, so it's a lot more relevant damage when you're playing kitten style, because instead of using damage on useless poke, you are getting relevant damage because you're either peeling someone or helping them kill them faster. One really good thing about her ultimate, once again, is that's very good for general mobility in the late game, or just for picks. Once again, with 40% CDR, you will have a 6-second ultimate, so you can constantly throw that out late game, and it's 7 meters, which is very far. So you can catch a lot of people unawares. I think your E into ult leaves them a very small amount of time to get out of the ult, so if you're peeling an ally again, if you land an E on a diving tank, you can use your ultimate to knock them away or knock them deeper into your team if you think you can take them out. So a lot of options with her ultimate. It's probably the most interesting part of her kit, honestly. I think her entire gameplay style is super linear if you're playing her kitten, and unfortunately it doesn't seem like there's really a way to play her otherwise. So yeah, quick, or I guess it's not really a quick video, but those are my thoughts on Leni. I think she will need a hotfix nerf, basically ASAP. We'll see if Nimrodon does that. It probably won't, but who knows. Anyways, hope you guys enjoyed the quick little Leni guide. Hope to see you guys next time. Have a good day or night wherever you are. I'll talk to you later. Bye bye.